യൂട്യൂബ് ലൈവിൽ എന്തെങ്കിലും വരുന്നുണ്ടോ നോക്കാം. ഏതോ കുഴപ്പം. അഗ്രികൾച്ചർ എക്കോ പ്രൈവറ്റ് ആക്കി വെച്ചതായിരുന്നു, ഇപ്പോൾ പബ്ലിക് ആക്കി. ആ അതെ. അച്ഛന് യൂട്യൂബിന്റെ ലിങ്ക് അയച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട് കേട്ടോ. അതെ, ഞാൻ പബ്ലിക് ആക്കി. ഞാൻ ഈ സ്ക്രീൻ വെച്ചിട്ട് പബ്ലിക്കായിട്ട് പോയിക്കൊണ്ട്. ആണോ? കിട്ടുന്നില്ലേ? അങ്ങനെ ഡിലേ ചെയ്ത് ഒന്നും കൂടെ അവർക്ക് അക്സെപ്റ്റ് ചെയ്യാനേ ഉള്ളൂ, ഒന്നും കൂടെ റിക്വസ്റ്റ് അയക്കാനേ ഉള്ളൂ. ആ, അത് പോപ്പപ്പ് വരാൻ മതിയല്ലോ. ഒന്ന് വരുന്നുണ്ടല്ലോ, പുതിയത് വേറെ വരുന്നില്ലേ? ഇവന്റ് പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് ഒരു 5 മിനിറ്റ് മുമ്പ് സ്ട്രീമിംഗ് ഓൺ ആക്കിയതാണ്. അപ്പം ഫ്ലോയിലാണ്.
നമ്മുടെ പിള്ളേർ മുഴുവൻ ആദ്യം കയറുന്നുണ്ട്.
ഇപ്പോഴേ ഗുഡ് മോർണിംഗ് ഒക്കെ ഇട്ട് തുടങ്ങുന്നത് ചാറ്റിൽ. അച്ഛനെ ഇട്ടിട്ടുണ്ട് ഞാൻ. അതിപ്പം പ്രൈവറ്റ് ആട്ടോ ഏട്ടാ, പ്രൈവറ്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ളത്.
അതെ, പ്രൈവറ്റിന് വരാം, അൺലിസ്റ്റഡ് ആണ്. ഇതേ നമ്മൾ അക്സെപ്റ്റ് ചെയ്തിട്ട് ബാക്കിയുള്ളവർ കയറി വരിക കേട്ടോ. ഇപ്പൊ ശരിക്കും കുറെ പേര് വരച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. 10-32 ഇല്ല, 10-15 മിനിറ്റ് ചോദിക്കാനോ
അൺലിസ്റ്റഡ് ആക്കി വെച്ചു.
അപ്പൊ അതിനകത്ത് ലിങ്ക് ഉള്ളവർക്ക് കാണാം. പറയുന്നൊക്കെ കേട്ടു. ഇപ്പൊ വേണമെങ്കിൽ മൈക്ക് ഓഫ് ചെയ്ത് വെച്ചു. അവിടുത്തെ നമ്മുടെ
മീറ്റിന്റെ അല്ലേ, മീറ്റിന്റെ മൈക്ക് ഓഫാണ്. ഞാൻ ഒന്നും ഇട്ടിട്ടില്ല. ഇവിടുത്തെ മൈക്ക് ഏതാണെന്ന് ഓൺ ആയിട്ടുണ്ട്. ഇങ്ങോട്ട് കയറുന്നു. ഇല്ല, ഇവിടെ മൈക്ക് ഔട്ടാണ്, ഓഫാണ്. സ്ട്രീമിങ് കുറച്ചൊരു ഡിലേ ഉണ്ടാവും എന്ന് നമ്മൾ നോക്കിയിട്ടായിരുന്നു. ഇങ്ങനെ വെച്ചിരിക്കുന്നത്, ഇങ്ങനെ ഇത് വെച്ചിരിക്കുന്നത്. ഓ അല്ല, വേറെ ആരോ എന്റെ സ്ക്രീൻ വേറെ ആരോ പ്രസന്റ് ചെയ്തതാണ്. ഓപ്പൺ ആണെന്ന് ഞാൻ ആദ്യം ചോദിച്ചു മാത്രം ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. അത് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റിയില്ലായിരുന്നു. സാർ ജോയിൻ ചെയ്തു. എല്ലാവരും ജോയിൻ ചെയ്തിരുന്നു. ആ സമയത്ത് കഴിഞ്ഞ പ്രാവശ്യം ഏറ്റവും കിട്ടിയില്ലായിരുന്നു. ഇതൊക്കെ എന്റെ വേണ്ട കാണിച്ചത്. മ്യൂട്ടഡ് ഫാദർ ജോർജ് മാത്യു പ്രസന്റേഷൻ അങ്ങനെ വരുന്നത് കാണാൻ മാത്രമല്ല ഓപ്ഷൻ ഉള്ളൂ. അതെ അതേ ഉള്ളൂ. അല്ല അത് കൺട്രോൾ ഉണ്ടാവില്ല അവർക്ക്. ഒരു മിനിറ്റോടെ അത് കുറച്ച് സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്യാൻ മാറ്റിക്കോ.
Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Shiji Francis. Today, we are presenting Agriculture and Rural Economy in the Post-COVID Scenario, organized by the Postgraduate Department of Commerce, Alphonsa College Thiruvambady. Hearty welcome, one and all, once again. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the eminent personalities of today. Dr. K.V. Chako, Honorable Principal, Alphonsa College Thiruvambady, Ms. Sani Thomas, Head of the PG Department of Commerce, Alphonsa College Thiruvambady, and the esteemed resource person of the day, Dr. Anil Kuruvila, Professor, Department of Agricultural Economics, College of Horticulture, Kerala Agriculture University, Thrissur. Now, I cordially invite our beloved principal, Dr. K.V. Chako, for the inaugural address. Sir, please.
A warm good morning to all. With great pleasure, I would like to welcome all the delegates to this international webinar organized by the Postgraduate Department of Commerce, Alphonsa College, Thiruvambady, Calicut, Kerala. Ours is an arts and science college affiliated to the University of Calicut and run by the Educational Trust of the Diocese of Tamarasheri. First of all, I congratulate Mrs. Anima Thomas, HOD, Mr. Dion Bablu, the coordinator, and also the other faculty members of the Commerce Department, along with the IPSC team of our college, who are organizing and materializing this online seminar. On this occasion, I have great pleasure to welcome and congratulate Dr. Anil Kuruvila, Professor, Department of Agriculture Economics, Kerala Agriculture University. He is an excellent teacher and eminent professor, and also a very reputed research guide with so many international and national publications. Today he speaks on agriculture and rural economy in post-COVID scenario, a very relevant and current topic as far as this pandemic is concerned. I also very happy to see that more than 250 delegates from 105 institutes, both from inside and outside India, are participating in this online event. So, with all your permission and also with your virtual presence, I formally inaugurating this webinar. Once again, I congratulate and welcome all of you and wish you a very fruitful and effective academic session ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your inspiring words. Now, I invite Ms. Sani Thomas, HOD, PG Department of Commerce, to introduce our resource person. Ma'am, please.
Good morning, one and all. I am profusely overjoyed to take this opportunity to introduce our resource person who has profound track record in the academic scenario. It is none other than Dr. Anil Kuruvila, Professor, Department of Agricultural Economics, College of Horticulture, Vellanikara, Tichu. He is well known for his excellent work in the field of teaching, research, publication, training, workshops, seminars, and allied activities. Dr. Anil Kuruvila secured PhD in Agriculture Economics from Tamil Nadu Agricultural University. He has 17 years of excellent experience in the field of teaching, research, extension activities. He has conducted several research projects, including assessing the implications of international price volatility on Indian agricultural prices in the context of trade liberalization organized by SANEI, South Asian Network of Economic Research Institute, Bangladesh, for which he won the award. His impeccable and versatile writing and finding out space in various international and national publications. His professional excellence were the end result of perfect tuning and nurturing through various training programs. Dr. Anil Kuruvila has been honored with several awards. One among them is to be noted is the Best Oral Presentation Award for the paper entitled Rice Economy of Kerala, Present Status and Future Directions. If I attempt to bring to your attention all the contributions of Dr. Anil Kuruvila, I would have to take more than an hour. Time is a limiting factor for us. So with the permission of all of the delegates, I cordially and proudly invite our chief guest of the day, Dr. Anil Kuruvila, to engage this session. Sir, please.
Shall I start presenting?
Okay, sir, sure.
My presentation, is it visible? Is it
No, sir, it's not visible.
presentation?
Sir, it's not visible now. Kindly give present now option.
Huh? Present now. It shows as if you are presenting. Enter screen അല്ല ഇതിൽ ക്ലിക്ക് ചെയ്തിട്ട് ഷെയർ അല്ല.
Sir, kindly click the option present now.
What is that? Yeah. എന്തെങ്കിലും ഓഫാണോ? എവിടെ? Is it visible?
Yeah, it's visible, sir.
Thank you. Yeah. So good morning, one and all. Respected principal of Alphonsa College Thiruvambady, Dr. K.V. Chako, respected head of the department, Zani Thomas of PG Department of Commerce, Department of Commerce of Thiruvambady, Alphonsa College, all the staff members and the participants. Good morning to one and all. First, let me thank the Department of Commerce and the principal for giving me this opportunity to present a seminar on agriculture and rural economy in the post-COVID scenario. Am I audible to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, thank you, madam, for your kind words. We are all in the midst of this pandemic, where none of us have been earlier experienced these type of situations in our life. And in this context, we'll be looking into some of the points, what this COVID has caused in the agricultural economy and the rural economy of the country as well as the world. My scheme of presentation will be like this. It will be giving you a brief picture of what Indian agriculture is, then the transmission of the COVID impact on food and agriculture systems, the implications on Indian agriculture, the government interventions, and the future strategies. As you all know, the country of India had a population of 361 million in 1951, and it increased to around 1.3 billion in 2019. But if you look at the share of agriculture and allied sector in GDP, it was more than 50% in 1951, which reduced to around 18% in 2019-20. It is inclusive of allied sector also. And the rural population in the country was around 83% in 1951, where it has decreased to 65%, and which shows the migration from the rural to the urban areas. So if you look at the population which is dependent on agriculture, about 85% of the population was dependent on agriculture, and the dependency on agriculture has decreased to 48% in 2019-20. And the total agricultural workers, still 44% of the total agricultural workers are total workers are agricultural workers in the country. And if you look at the same time, if you look at the holding size, that is what is the average holding size in the country, it has decreased from 1.41 to 1.15 hectare, which is in Kerala, which is very low, as low as 0.16. So in the case of Indian agriculture, making food available to the 1.3 billion population, which is more than 3 times the population at the time of freedom, was the aim. And food security was our option, was our need. That is having access to food for all the population of the country. So it was low at the time of independence, with before independence, with a lot of famines and a lot of issues. And if you look at the demand and supply gap, the demand was very high, but the supply was low. And if you look at the food grain production in India, from 51 to 66, it increased from around 55 million tons to 72 million tons. And at the same time, the imports to the country, because of this gap in between the demand and the supply, was rising, and it was as high as 10 million tons in 1966. Then came the Green Revolution program in the 1966, And if you look here, you find that the imports after that in the 70s and the 80s, by around 1991, the imports decreased almost to zero, almost it was nil. And because the food grain production was continuously increasing. So the increase in food grain production resulted in the decline in the food grain import. And from the ship to mouth situation, we were dependent on food aid earlier, and we became a net exporter of the seventh largest exporter in exporter. And then because of the green revolution and the intensive agriculture development programs like the green revolution with the hybrid technology, and also the operations like white revolutions and the regulation of market, all these have induced agricultural growth in the country. At the time of independence, the population growth was around 2.2%, which decreased to around 1.1%. So food security was low at the time of independence, but now it has become a right. So if you look at the what has happened, we have self-sufficiency now, but because of the technology or because of the things that happened in agriculture, there is a plateauing of yield. That means the yields have become constant. There is no much of increase in yield with land degradation, groundwater exploitation, and issues with regard to input use. So at the time of independence, physical access to food was a problem, but with the passage of time, economic access was food. Even if there was food, people were not able to buy food. But with the passage of time, the people, when the people below the poverty line, the population below the poverty line decreased, but still we have around one third of the population below poverty line, and that is an issue still. And at the same time, now we talk about safe food, and whether the food that we eat is safe. When the income level is increasing to a certain level, we have talked about the ecological access to food and the environmental concerns that we have in agriculture. So now we talk about the one nation, one market, and with many post-harvest management issues in the country, where the farmers are getting not benefited. Then in 1991, what happened was, we know about the economic reforms of the 1991, the LPG, that is the liberalization, privatization, and the globalization policies, which are also implemented in agriculture with the agreement of WTO agreement in 1995 and the subsequent proliferating regional trading agreements that happened in the country. So the license permit Raj was that the red tapeism was removed by the liberalization measures of the government, and India was integrated with the world by the reduction of the tariffs and the allowing of FDI into the country. And also the private sector was allowed to come into every sector. So the economic reforms also affected the every sector of the country, and Indian agriculture is also not an exemption to that. With this background, I'm coming to the topic, that is COVID, the impact of COVID. If you look into the COVID, it has turned the world upside down. We can say that in our lifetime, this is the only event which has turned the world upside down, maybe after the World War II. So first case in India was reported on 30th January 2020. And we can say that everything has been impacted. No sector, no person we can say that nobody can be left out of the impact of COVID. So how we live, how we interact with each other, how we work, how we communicate, even how we conduct a seminar have been affected by the COVID. So decisions made now and the events that are happening now will affect people around the world in the years to come. And the lockdown has affected all sectors and firms with significant heterogeneities. So if you look at the impact of COVID, it has got mainly an economic impact. Along with that, there is a health impact. But the COVID impact is affecting humanity by disrupting the lives and livelihoods of the people. And the scale and severity of COVID is unprecedented. If you look at the economic impact in the country, the kind of vulnerability that we have, as I was telling earlier, this is an economic crisis that has affected the world more than anything else after the World War II. And because of this economic vulnerability, if you look at the vulnerability to this, many of the developing countries are vulnerable to the economic impact, either through trade, either through disruptions in the value chain system, the supply chain systems, not only in agriculture, in the whole economy. And we know about the international trade being completely stopped, the labor market being affected. So it is the highest or the biggest unemployment decline since the World War II, and the impact on these sectors have been specific also. So if you look at the working hours throughout the world, the working hours throughout the world has declined by more than 10%. So trade, prices, production, tourism, everything has been affected. And if you look at the impact, this economic impact is very much related to the health impact, because people, because of the social distancing norms, or because of the migration, in fear of the job, fear of the disease, or all these are having social impacts also. So if you look at the agriculture and food, we are having, we related to the social impact. There is malnutrition due to the induced this shutdown, or the lockdown, as well as the migration of the labor. There is disruption in the global supply chains, and the labor shortages are causing a lot of issues throughout the world. So developing countries are more exposed to demand side risk, and there is a social risk, like, all these sectors have. I mean, the lower the human development, greater is the risk, and there is a displacement. And COVID has affected more of urban rather than rural areas also. So all these sectors have been impacted throughout the world. So if we come to the COVID impact, see, if you look at the transmission of channels of transmission of COVID impact, so it is a pandemic that is affecting all sectors. So COVID, I'm coming to the food system, food and agriculture. If you look at the food and agriculture, COVID has affected the entire food system of the country. It affects both the demand as well as the supply chains, or the supply channels. The effect on the demand and the supply are symmetric but asynchronous. That means it is not at the same time. There is a shock to the global and the national food systems, but it is not at the same time. So it affects all the elements of the food system, from the primary supply to the processing, to the trade, as well as the national and the international logistics system, and to intermediate and final demand. So if you look at the food supply, we know that the food supply is affected by the factor markets. So this is affecting the capital market. So if you look at the direct health and indirect shutdown effects through multiple channels, the reverse migration, the illness, and the quarantine restrictions, and also the aversion because of this disease, has affected the labor-intensive supply chains. So it has affected the labor-intensive supply chains. It has also affected the intermediate inputs. So if you look at the intermediate inputs in production, other than labor and capital, we have fertilizer, we have seeds, we have pesticides, feeds for the animal power. So these intermediate inputs are also affected. So in India, about 25% of the value of our output is accounted by these intermediate inputs, or the value of output is accounted by this intermediate inputs. And this intermediate input sector is also affected. So the supply shocks are preceding the demand shocks. And if you look at the Indian agriculture system, wherever the agriculture system is input intensive, there is input intensive agricultural systems have been disrupted because of the transportation, because of the disruption of transportation, because of the clogged ports, because of the roads, restrictions in roads, the delays in custom clearance, everything have been affecting. Even the credit have been affecting the supply. So capital intensive production, if it is capital intensive, the machines or the credit system has also been affected. So we have to remember that the transfer of this into the food system also come from other channels like credit, energy, and the exchange rate systems also. So the credit market will affect the borrowing habits of people. If they want to invest in agriculture, invest in food supply, they need to borrow. The energy prices will affect the transportation cost, the fertilizer prices. It will have implications on the prices of other commodities, including the metals as well as other. And if you look at the exchange rate dynamics, exchange rate system, when we know that there is a depreciation of the Indian rupee against dollar, and when all the exports have stopped, exports have almost come to nil or standstill. There is no benefit from that depreciation in exchange rate or the improvement in competitiveness of our exports. So the imports will become expensive if they are allowed, but the exports, even though they become competitive, it will be difficult. So if you look at the food demand, the food demand will affect. Food demand is also affected through the exchange rates and credits and the energy markets. And always we have to remember that food demand will be affected by the surge in unemployment and the contraction in the economic activity in the country. So if you look at the low income country, there is a greater employment of labor, because their production capacity is mostly more of labor intensive rather than capital intensive. So because of that, fruits, vegetables, dairy, and rice require 70% labor on the total cost of cultivation. So because of that, the income generation of those people, the lower lower income class, or the people are affected, and the food demand is also affected, which has got implications in the that is how the transmission happens. So if you look at the food expenditure and the income elasticity of demand, the food expenditure will be affected, because when people have their income which is decreasing, they spend most of their income on food, but essential foods they'll keep, and the other fruits or the vegetables, or they may keep to cereals or the most essential ones, and they may keep and they move away from the high value food crops. And even we know that the demand is income inelastic, but it may not be true for the high value food crops. So through all these channels, the transmission, since in nutshell we can say that the purchasing power of people are affected, especially the working class, and that will affect the whole system. So that is how this transmission of this impact is happening in the food supply chain. So developing countries have this was a study that was conducted by Food and Agricultural Organization, and it was found that developing countries have higher degrees of exposure to demand risk, because the effect will be more on the demand side, and because the people are we know that the downturn in economic growth and the associated income contractions will result in undernutrition and micronutrient deficiencies among these populations. And so because there will be high propensity to adversely change the dietary intakes in the poor countries to the income, because of the income shocks. So the developed countries will be more affected by the supply side shocks. If you look at a country like India, you find a combination of both, because the government is trying to stop the influence or the impact on the demand side, and it is trying to remove the restrictions on the supply side. We have both. So heightened demand risk for countries will be there if they rely on food imports, and countries which are having food imports will be affected more. So especially the second point is that we are exporting many of the raw commodities, so that will be affected, because many of our agricultural exports are in the form of raw products, and that will be affected. So when the higher income brackets are affected by the disruptions in the supply chain, and because there will be higher integration of the global supply chain and the capital intensive agricultural system. So in developed countries, the higher income groups will be affected. That is the thing. But in India, we find a blend of these things. So that is what we find. So increased borrowings can also happen in middle income countries like India, which increases the production cost. We know that there is a reduction in the labor supply. There is a migration of labor and there is reduction in labor supply. And because of that, the production costs have increased and people have started borrowing credit. If you look at this is a cloud, the cloud count of the paper reports, newspaper tweets in the world done by FAO. And if you look at the topics, because these are the topics that are coming in newspapers around the world after the COVID, and you find that agriculture, rice, trade, food, market, economic, salaries, debt, budget, you find fish, poverty, all these things are coming and they are interrelated. And you find the lines like food, price, economic are bolder. That means they are affected. Even agriculture is also comparatively increased. So, but the effect on agriculture will be comparatively less when compared to other sectors. So this, they have taken the cloud count. Actually, they have taken the data from different publications, and they find what people are more concerned about in connection with COVID. And the same when it was looked into about the newspaper tweets and news in India, it was found that the COVID reports were mostly on the workers. That is, we talked much about the migrant workers. Then comes funding, salaries, and we know that food, agriculture, rice, markets are also affected. And there are interlinkages between these two, along with price also. And transport is also a good topic that has been discussed much. So if you look at the news coverage over themes, and you find that food, markets, agriculture, and these are very much discussed throughout the world, and trade, and these are all interlinked among each other. And that is the commodity themes that have been discussed. These are the issues that are people facing throughout the world. So if you look at the implications of COVID-19 on price fall, the commodity food prices, if you look at the inflation, the basic of the basic food items, it is in India, it is inelastic, and it will also be affected by the actual and the expected disruption of supply, and the production and partly the distribution and the marketing are affected. So what happens is, if there is even marginal increase in food price, inflation will affect the welfare of the classes who have lost their incomes because of the COVID. So if you look at the price volatility or price variations, it can be fall or rise. It will make already the income is unstable. They make the income unstable for the people, and it will affect if people start dissaving, or they will use their savings, or they will start borrowing their money. And this in turn will affect in agriculture the investment decisions made by the people, because prices vary, prices fall, because we don't know how long this pandemic is going to be, how long it is going to affect the world trade, the inter-district trade, inter-state trade. So it will affect the profitability of crops, the relative prices of crops. It can even affect the cropping pattern, and people start leasing, even selling the land. When we don't know what will happen to a particular crop, when we grow it, the input use in that crop will be affected. That is, the investment decisions, we don't make huge investments. If I was talking to rubber growers, and people were reluctant to put the rain guard or look after the rain guard, and people were reluctant to carry out operations in cardamom and pepper, you find the investment decisions being affected. And even in pineapple, we know about pineapple, where pineapple is grown as a ratoon crop, that is, people take for a lease land and cultivate it for 3 years, and most of the people are trying to forgo the third year, or trying to come out of that contract, and that is affecting their input decisions and investment decisions. And even if they continue, it will affect their input use, which will in turn affect the food production and the food consumption. And what I wanted to conclude was that it will affect the food security, the poverty, and the welfare of the country, especially the small and marginal farmers and the poor laborers. So if you look at the implications on prices, if the average prices of 14 agricultural commodities were taken during COVID pandemic, and it was found that the price changes in India was most of the countries it is high, and it is about 3.9%. And but in the last 30 days, there is a decline in agricultural commodity price. This is the wholesale price, so it may not truly reflect the farmer price. And the price changes in the last 7 days up to July 7th was it was around minus 0.5% actually. But what we find in India is a peculiar situation where prices have declined for the farmers, but the consumers are paying high price because of the supply bottlenecks that are happening in and around the marketing centers as well as the transportation. So throughout the world, the global price changes have been on the positive side. So it is mostly affecting the demand and that is the demand side. So that is what we find. So if you look at the implications on the food supply chain, the food supply is a complex web of interactions of actors, and that is, it includes producers, inputs, transportation, processing plants, shipping, storage. So you find many activities in the food supply chain. So even farming is getting affected, processing is getting affected, the transportation and the storage is getting affected, even other than the selling activities. Many of the shops were also closed, so the selling activities are also getting affected. If you look at a channel, a marketing channel, so you find a farmer selling to an aggregator or a commission agent or a village trader or any collection center. All these channels are disrupted with an into mark, and he is not able to take it to the market or sell it. And this happens even at the exporter side also. These disruptions to the supply chains are affecting causing the supply shocks. So supply shocks, you should remember that it is not due to lack of availability of agricultural commodities, and more it is not lack of availability, but it is because of lack of movement. And reduction in labor force has affected the intensive labor production. We know that the labor migration has caused the labor intensive production, and it can lead to lower production. And what has happened, it is true in the case of processing. In the case of coconut in Kerala, many of the harvested coconuts were not taken to the farm or taken, or it could not be transported, or there was no possibility for harvesting. About cardamom, every crop you find the effect. And the supply shocks was more in terms of logistics of the movement of the goods. So the transport restrictions and the quarantine restrictions have affected the farmers' access to input and output market, and it has affected the fresh, and especially affected the fresh and agricultural, that is perishable commodity chains, because they will deteriorate, and that has resulted in the loss. I'll show you some examples also. So we have the demand shocks on the other side. The food demand is generally inelastic. There will be changes in the dietary pattern. The consumption of high value commodities have declined, and the food demand for the poor, because it becomes income elastic, because they lost their income, they started buying more, and the food consumption is also affected because people we all try to visit less the markets. So if you look at the specific cases in Kerala, and I'm taking just Kerala because there is a disruption of value supply chain of pineapple, because pineapple is going to the North Indian markets, especially during the summer months. So maximum price of 30 to 35 rupees per kg was obtained in the summer months, and the cost of production is around 20 to 25 rupees per kg. But this year, because of all the supply chain disruptions, it was sold at 10 to 12 rupees per kg, and the labor scarcity and the increased labor costs have affected. Now the labor charges in the pineapple gardens have even gone up to 1,200 rupees from 800 rupees, and people have started even cancelling the lease agreements that have been made with the rubber growers. So this is the effect that we find. Mango. See, in Kerala, the Modalamada is known as the mango city. So, and in India, there are specific mangoes, Malgova, different mangoes that are grown. And the first bearing of mango comes to yield and comes to ripening in the southern part, that is in Kerala, and usually begins from February and it starts from Kerala. And you should remember one thing: the farmers, because of the disruption, were getting very low price. But you should always remember that consumers in Mumbai were paying per dozen 600 rupees. So, the mango processors in different states, where they were buying only 50% of the normal requirement because they were already having the stocks of the processed commodities. Whereas India exported fresh mangoes of worth 406 crore rupees in 2018-19. But what happened is, into US, if we export, they sent inspectors for the consignment inspection. This year it was not sent, and so the exports were affected. And the top export destinations to the country were affected by the export ban. But in Kerala, the Department of Agriculture procured about 5 tons of mango, and it was marketed in the flats or from farm to fork sales or housing societies, and ISAF in Tiruchur has sold like that. But if you look at the varietal distribution of mango, there are different varieties that are grown and the price varies from even 50 to 200 and 250 rupees for different varieties of mango. And these are the various value shares of the stakeholders in the consumer's rupee. The producers getting some 23% or 14% of the price that is paid by the retailer. And but what happened is, because of this thing, the producer's share in the consumer rupee has increased. They were sold at 50 rupees, they got 25 rupees. But earlier, they were sold at 150 rupees and they got 14%. So even though the producer's share has decreased, the price at which the producer has sold has declined. So because of the disruptions happening in all the value chain. So I told you about 40,000 tons of mango is produced in Mudalamada. And especially these grade 1 mangoes and grade 2 mangoes are harvested and marketed to North India or export. And all these markets, which are highly priced, were all affected because of the disruptions that were happening in the supply chain, especially the supply chain. So if you look at the state planning board's estimates of the impact of COVID on Kerala agriculture, and what has happened is there is a loss in exports of cash crops and spices, and there is a loss because the most of the cash crops and the spices grown in the state are export. It is intended for export at least 40% or 50%, and when the prices are very much linked to the exports, so the exports were affected, and there was a fall in the domestic prices of agricultural commodities and livestock products. And the scarcity of labor has affected the production as well as the food processing units. There was loss to the public institution. The initial estimate, this is only an advanced estimate, to agriculture is around 1,500 crores in Kerala. And the labor alone has lost 200 crores, and they are revising this estimate. And this is only for less than 1 month after the lockdown. So if you look at the implications on the labor, 32% of the rural labor in the country, 32% of the rural labor household income comes from the wages. And 12% is derived from the animal rearing, which has been severely affected by the lockdown. So the wages, if this is affected, around 35% of the rural household income is affected. So we know about 40 to 50 million seasonal migrant workers in India. So the unemployment shot up 8.4% in mid-March to 23% in April and May. There is a massive job loss and low income, and there is a rural distress and malnutrition, widespread inequality, and rising food and nutritional insecurity. Because government has taken up some steps, but still people are suffering. The government has correctly issued lockdown guidelines, and farm operations and supply chains were exempted, but still there were restrictions, and the labor shortages and falling prices were still an issue. So if you look at the implications on the world trade and India's trade, and the world trade has declined 13 to 32% due to the COVID pandemic, varies from commodity to commodity. So you should remember that whenever we are part of any global value chain, that is, we export a raw material which is getting processed in the global value chain, the effect on the industries will be very high. So pepper, if it is exported as a raw material for oleoresin, and in Vietnam or in any other country, so then, if you are part of a global value chain, global processing, you are going to be affected. So India is going to be affected by demand shocks rising from fall in consumption and investment that is happening across the world. So India generally has a higher level of forward participation. That is, India mostly export the raw materials, and so because of that, only those sectors are affected. We import less of inputs and export. If there are sectors like that, that will be affected. So demand shock will not be that affected, because our participation in the global value chain is comparatively less. So if we look at the farm exports, it's declined even in 2019. By March, it declined by around 13% because of the weak demand and pricing issues. And the top three products, basmati rice, buffalo meat, and non-basmati rice, declined. It accounted for 60% of the total exports and declined by 15%. And the exports of pulses and the floriculture also decreased. This is as per APEDA, Agricultural Products Export Development Authority. So what we have to keep in mind is, because of this pandemic, people will be more concerned about the food safety issues. And there is a relationship between health, food systems, and diet. So in the WTO agreement, there is an agreement on application of sanitary and phytosanitary measures, which countries can impose based on to protect the food and animal health, and that should not be affecting our commodities. And similarly, the agreement on technical barriers to trade, the packaging, or the requirement, the size of the bags, all of the things will be hereafter will be affecting the trade in the world. So it's a greater food insecurity is from the demand side, because there is social distancing and lockdown. There is unprecedented number of people who are losing their jobs, and in this situation, effective social nets are important. And the government of India has put forth different steps. So if you look at the steps that were put forth by government of India, the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, that was an economic full-fledged package, and the government of India for the complete revival of the economy with self-reliance. And the government of India included agricultural activities in the essential list, and the PM Kisan payment, that is 2,000 rupees 2,000, was announced to the farmers, and around 87 million farmers were affected. There is wage hike from in MNREGs, and MNREG was extended to the laborers and also the rural non-farm sector and the migrant laborers. The Reserve Bank of India was also announced the moratorium. That means the repayment of loans was extended by 6 months. And the food scheme, the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana, was also giving the rice and wheat to. But especially in the case of agriculture, there were amendments. There were agri-market reforms, where amendment of Essential Commodities Act. Then there is the National Law of Agricultural Market, One Nation, One Market, the legal framework to enable contract farming, and the development of Agricultural Infrastructure Fund, and the formalization of micro food enterprise, MSME, and micro food enterprise, and scheme for medicinal plants were introduced. So this Essential Commodity Act was for helping the farmers to ensure or help them get better prices, because as a result of deregulation of prices of foodstuffs, including cereals, edible oils, oil seeds, pulses, were done, and this has removed the hurdles to private investment in post-harvest and warehousing and processing, and this will make agriculture more competitive. This is actually the Essential Commodity Act. According to that, the sender was able to impose restrictions on storage and movement of certain commodities, and it was a hurdle to private investment, and that was removed. And another was this farmers' empowerment and the protection agreement on price insurance and assurance and farmer service. That is it is actually the it is about contract farming. Actually, there's an agreement. It covers. There is that agreement was implemented. Government wanted to implement that. It will increase. That is increase the ability of farmers and farmer producer organizations to sell the commodities to outside the APMCs, the agriculture produce market committees, to people. That is, it is permitted to direct sale outside the APMCs to the contract agreements. So that was also allowed. And then this farmer produce trade and commerce, that is one nation, one market, by removing restrictions in the movement, the barriers in the movement of commodity from one state to another. And it was especially in this, we have to talk about the ENAM, E-National Agricultural Market, where the trading channels, that is all traders can participate in electronic trading, which will promote the competition and give farmers a remunerative price. That will reduce the transportation cost, reduce the commission payment, and reduce other costs. So this has helped in the PAN card. Farmers was not required to register anywhere. Only thing that was required was the PAN card for the agriculture traders. So we have the agriculture infrastructure fund and also the formalization of micro enterprise. So towards the end, what I wanted to tell you was, what is the strategy that is required? Maybe in 5 minutes, we need to look for aggregation of small and marginal farmers to increase their bargaining power, to increase the contractual agreement, because mostly the developments in the marketing are gained. These gains will go through the traders rather than the farmers. So they should be, their farmer producer organizations should be formed, and that will help in reduction of transaction cost. The Pyramid Development Society is an example where we have conducted a study where farmers, there are 2,000 certified organized farmers, and there is an internal control system. And they get an 30 rupees extra, they get inputs, and they get a lot of flexibility. And we found that the average price received in 2 years, actually, when we studied, when others face a greater fall, the average price received by the PDS farmers are less, and there is a production is high. It is percentage production in the case of the farmers having a contractual agreement will be high. There is an income growth as well as the effect, other effects will be less. Especially the market intelligence is an important aspect, because we should know where to sell, when to sell, how to sell. The use of information and communication technology becomes very important. We have to tell farmers and how to sell. So that helps in the price, containing the price volatility and suitable price mechanisms. And if you look at pepper prices are declining. That is what you find. So we have to tell farmers where to store, when to buy. We have to look at price forecasting, and we have done a price forecasting of black pepper, and we communicated it to the farmers, and because of that, their income increased from 30 to 50% because they were asked to stock the commodity. So that is what is the market forecasting that is important. So our predictions, so that is the predictions and the prices, actual prices were always matching. So that is required in all commodity. So then branding of agricultural commodities are required, because that will help us to tide over price signals and make farmers quality conscious, because in this situation, people will become very quality conscious and they have to produce, and we should market the branded products from our country, from our state, and that will also use indigenous technical knowledge, which uses less pesticides and fungicides. So then crop diversification and income diversification are important, because we have to diversify beyond labor intensive and water intensive crop to environmentally sustainable crop with a strong financial intensive incentives as well as strong value chains. And we have to look for high value food. We have to educate farmers as well as consumers, and we have to look into increased investment in the animal husbandry. So value addition and processing are very important, because we need to look helping farmers for value addition, because post harvest losses are very high. The logistics and the cold chains need to be developed. We need to have sustainable agricultural policies that are resilient to the new normal, because it is estimated that 20 to 30% of the agriculture produce is getting wasted. So we have to look for post-harvest management, agriculture logistics, the transportation, the cold chains. All these things have to be developed in the country as well as in the state. So if we look at the tweets that are happening around the world, by around April, mostly our tweets were about COVID, and from April, what happened is other tweets have taken over. Then the over the COVID. That is, COVID has become a new normal for us. So in this new normal, we need to equip our farmers and encourage them to do farming with the new areas and new intentions. So COVID-19, I hope that it will, with time, the world will be able to cope with that and learn to live with it. And I wish that all of you take care and be safe. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for the patient listen.
Salam. കുഴപ്പമൊന്നുമില്ല. ക്വാറന്റൈനിലാണ്. ഇപ്പൊ പനിയൊന്നുമില്ല.
I have finished my presentation.
If you have any queries, kindly ask it through the chat box.
Thank you, sir.
Did I take some time for? Did I take some extra time? Sorry if I have overshoot.
Shall we ask questions?
Yeah, if you have any.
So my name is Muhammad Anas.
Yeah.
I'm an alumni of Alphonsa College.
Okay.
So my question is, I have a concern about this one. Around 75% of our Keralians, that means Malayalis, are engaged with animal husbandry, right?
Yeah.
But still they couldn't yield more.
Yeah.
And we don't have any dairy products of our own.
Yeah, definitely.
Just Milma or something. Yeah. Milma is still an autonomous something. Yeah. Monopoly on that one.
Yeah.
So how can we uplift those farmers who are engaged with animal husbandry?
Yeah. Mohammed,
so my question is, if they have enough yield, how can we ensure a proper income to those families?
Yeah. Definitely, I should say that in many of the states, many of the districts of Kerala, people survive the price fall in agricultural commodities only because they have livestock, especially in Wayanad or northern districts of Kerala. But as you said, a farmer with one or two cows, value addition is impossible for him. You take the case of Amul, or you take the case of an aggregation. So farmers should think about aggregating into units. One farmer cannot do that. You should always think about forming a farmer producer company or some companies where they can aggregate their milk. The best example, as you all know, is Amul. What else? Yesterday I was just looking at Amul is going to market even edible oil. Everything they are marketing, everything they are doing. We need to bring in technology, and we need to, there is something called as the economies of scale. One or two cows may be sufficient for a farm. Maybe he may be able to sell in the nearby areas. But even if there is a society to buy this limited quantity, as in the case of Amul or Milma, he will be benefited. But still, if you are talking about the processed products, you should look for aggregation, that is formation of farmer producer companies, and get technology. You should look into the all those things and look at the consumer demand also, and educate the farmers as well as the consumers about your products. That is the session that I have.
Yeah, according to my survey, I have done just a project on the same.
Yeah.
So, the one thing I have made clear is that 30% of such products have been wasted because of due to non-efficient supply chain.
Yeah, these are the problems that we have in our supply chain. We cannot, that is true for any commodity. We call reefer vans or the efficient supply chains or cold chains are lacking. And where should be that cold chain? We should bring in the cold chains where, place it, just not establishing some markets or go downs or, that is not what is needed. We need to completely remove the inefficiencies in the chain, actually. We need to sit down and see whether we can reduce the loss in the specific places in the supply chain and reduce the loss. And each reduction of the loss is an improvement for the farmer's income. That is what is required.
Yeah, so government also has a major role in that, right?
Definitely. But one thing I'll tell you, Mohammed, we always have an inclination towards government. I agree. We should. Government is doing, but more of that, more than that, it should come from ourselves. The farmer producer organization should be one that came out of it is self-help through mutual help, as we see in the case of a cooperative. It should come out of the own interest and effort of the farmer, but get all the support from the government for that. That is what is
required. So can I speak my language also, right? അപ്പോൾ ഞാനൊരു ചോദിക്കുന്നത് ഇപ്പം ഞാനൊരു കർഷക ഫാമിലിയാണ്. എൻ്റെ ഉപ്പൊക്കെ ചെറുപ്പം മുതൽ പറഞ്ഞ നീ പോയി പഠിച്ചോ, കൃഷി കൊണ്ടൊന്നും ജീവിക്കാൻ പറ്റില്ല എന്നുള്ളൊരു ആറ്റിറ്റ്യൂഡ് ഫാമേഴ്സിന് വന്നു തുടങ്ങിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. എസ്പെഷ്യലി എന്റെ നാടുകളിലൊക്കെ കൃഷി കൊണ്ടൊന്നും രക്ഷപ്പെടില്ല.
That is true in Kerala, everywhere.
അതെ, അപ്പം അങ്ങനെ ഒരു സാഹചര്യം നാട്ടിലുണ്ട്. ആ ഒരു ആറ്റിറ്റ്യൂഡ് മാറാതിരുന്നാൽ ഇത് നമ്മൾ എന്തൊക്കെ കൊണ്ടുവന്നിട്ടും കാര്യമുണ്ട്.
So we need to bring in youth to agriculture, and we need to. The attitude has to change. And have you seen people from IIMs stopping their jobs where they earn 50 lakhs or 60 lakhs or 1 crore per annum, coming back and starting farm units or livestock units and doing agriculture. You should. The thing is, we don't think about the market. We don't think about the supply chain. We don't think about the value addition. We don't think about the losses. We need to increase. Hope you have studied about the economies of scale. We need to scale up by aggregating with like-minded people, or we need to increase the small size may not help always. That is the issue there. Okay, Mohammed?
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, there are some other queries too.
Yeah.
Sir, shall I read it?
Yeah, please read.
What's your idea about vocal to local related to agri products? It was one question.
Yeah.
What's your idea about vocal to local related to agri products?
Yeah. Okay. Any other related question?
Two more questions are there, but different. How supply shocks in terms of logistics? It was one question. And one more is there. How can we overcome the problems of ecological access of food?
Yeah. See, let me answer one by one. The first one was about being local, no? From vocal. Okay. The thing is, now I was just talking about what happened at the time of pandemic is there was a movement from the farm to fork. Many places, the commodities were harvested in Kerala. I don't say that was a foolproof, but it was sold in Kerala because we have consumers in the cities, consumers looking for the products, ready to pay the price, maybe 3 times, 4 times what the farmers get if they are able to bring in directly to the or link it with a lesser intermediary. So we have buyers locally also. So we need to move, think about these products. Many times we may buy the mango juice which is coming from another country and packed in our country, and we drink it. But we have mango, and they sell it at 20 and 25 rupees. So we have to look into the local production systems, and we have to Atmanirbhar is important. So we have to look at the local production systems, the local consumption system. As I said, there should be a correct estimation of the demand and supply locally, and we should be able to link these producers and consumers. That is what is required. Okay. Then you are talking about the ecological access. When the income of the people are increasing, people talk about ecological access. Now we talk about the commodities coming from other states, or the pesticide residues and the ban of pesticides. And we all should be concerned about the health concern should be there for each one of us. So we should be concerned about the ecological access, and we should think about organically produced food. And the organically produced food, certified food, should be properly certified, and the consumer should get, and it should be ensured that it is organic, or it is less pesticide is used. There should be good agricultural practices that should be happening in the farm. That is what is required. So then one question was on the supply chain. When the logistics, when the transportation cost is a major cost. About bringing food grains from Punjab is very much costlier than bringing food grain from Vietnam. So the logistic cost is a major cost. If you think about the flights, the flights were cancelled and many flights were converted to cargo flights, and because of that, they have increased the charges thrice. So because of the disruption of the transportation system, see the loads, because of the disruption of the movement from one place to another, that is, you face inefficient handling. The disruption of the supply chain means transportation, logistics, loading and unloading, everything is getting affected. That increases the cost, many times, and that is a that way it is a disruption to the supply chain. Okay, is it all right? The moderator, please.
Hello.
Yeah. I hope I have answered. Any more?
Hello.
Hello. Hello. Hope I have answered.
I call upon Mr. Dior, webinar coordinator for vote of thanks.
Hello.
It's audible.
Can I ask a question, sir?
I think somebody has called the webinar coordinator for a vote of thanks. I think.
Okay.
Honorable Principal Dr. Thakur KV, our beloved HOD, Mrs. Sanima PV, honorable faculty, research college, students, and all other participants of the webinar. A warm good afternoon to all. I deem it a great honor to propose the vote of thanks to all who have helped us in making this webinar such a resounding success. First of all, I would like to express our profound gratitude to our principal, Dr. Thakur KV, for inaugurating the webinar, and also for his wholehearted assistance and guidance for the success of our webinar. Next, I would like to propose the hearty vote of thanks to our resource person, Dr. Anil Kuruvila sir, for making excellent presentation and making the webinar interesting and meaningful. He is a person who worked on the vision of establishing a Center for Agricultural Trade and Spices at Kerala Agricultural University. He covered all the relevant areas and aspects related to the topic in a systematic and well understandable manner. Once again, thank you, sir, for your awesome and thought-provoking session.
Thank you.
I would also like to thank our beloved HOD, Mrs. Sarama KV, one who introduced the resource beds. I also extend thanks to her moral support and guidance. I extend sincere gratitude to our manager, Reverend Father Karyam Mugaril, Vice Principal, Reverend Father Shemish Agustin, IQAC Coordinator, Reverend Father Gio Matthew, and Reverend Father George Matthew, Moderator Shiti Francis, for making the webinar a great success. I would like to thank the technical team and all my beloved colleagues who have been running around doing a lot of things. Finally, the wonderful participants who turn up in great numbers, including faculty, research scholars, students, and all others, not only from our state, but also from other states and other nations. I extend a wholehearted gratitude for your cooperation. Once again, I thank for all your cordial cooperation from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dear participants, thank you for joining the webinar conducted by the Postgraduate Department of Commerce, Alphonsa College Thiruvambady. There is a feedback form which is available in the chat box. You can open the link and can enable your feedback, and certificate will be provided. Those who are registered. So thank you once again for joining our webinar and to become this a successful one. Thank you.
Thank you.